Please be seated. Shana Tova and Shabbat Shalom. A few months ago, a picture popped up on my Facebook feed. I imagine some of you saw it as well. It was an image of a glass half filled with water. The caption read, "Any other year, some will say that the glass is half full. Some will say it is half empty. But in 2020, we look at the glass and say in this plagued year, it's probably filled with sewage." I cannot count how many times I have given up on 2020. When Amy Acton left her position, well, it was 2020. When the schools changed their plans for the third time, or the fourth time, or the 24th time, it's just 2020. The problem is, of course, that 2020 is not the problem. What this year has made evident is that the only thing that is certain in our world is uncertainty. That is nothing new. It is not linked to a particular date on our calendar, and when we turn the page from 2020 to 2021, or as we do today, from 5780 to 5781, that uncertainty is not going to go away just because a new year has begun. It did not arrive with the virus, and it will not depart with a vaccine. We live in an uncertain world. We always have, and we always will. In a few moments, Cantor Kathy will chant the very first words of the Torah, the words of the first story of creation, the declaration that day and night were separated, that animals were placed in their homes among the newly formed land, and the words that we, human beings, were made in God's image along their side. The story of creation, the book of Genesis, is in itself an answer to immense uncertainty. It is a guidebook for us, and it could not be more relevant than in this unfortunate and unpredictable year. But today, do not read it as a blueprint for what happened in the past. Do not read it as though it tells us of our history or of how science was created. Don't even read it about the beginning of creation, even though it was probably written to answer those questions, written to fill in the gaps of what people did not know looking back through history. Today, read it as a blueprint for what we do when we are uncertain, not about our past, but about our future. This is what it is a blueprint for what we can do next. One of the great Jewish philosophers of the 19th century, Hermann Cohen, himself a staunch rationalist, taught that if you want to understand human nature, then you should turn to the scientific method. But if you want to improve human nature, you have to posit God as its logical ground. In other words, if you want to know about why something happened, read history, talk to a scientist. They know the answers. But if you want to know what you should do next, what is in the future, turn to a book like Genesis, a book that begins with chaos, without order, a book that begins with overwhelming darkness and uncertainty. Bereshit bara Elohim, what did the world look like when God began creating? Tohu vavohu, we read, v'choshech al panei tahom. Everything was a waste, and darkness dominated the depths of the world. You want to know what the world looked like before the first words of Torah describe creation? It looked like a cup filled with sewage. It was a mess. The first words of Genesis are no longer our response to the uncertainty of the past. It is our response to the certainty of the future. Genesis declares wholeheartedly that the answer to an uncertain future is to get creative. Where there is darkness, add light. Where there is no life, dream of a world where seas give sustenance to plants and plants to animals. Where there is no humanity, it calls upon us, as our Talmud states, be human. And so my answer to a sewage-filled year is it is time to read Genesis the right way. Let us read it as a story about having confidence when we have no idea if we will succeed. A story about having the courage to believe in ourselves when perhaps we're uncertain of what we can do. The way to respond to uncertainty is not to eliminate it. It is to have the courage to face it. It is, as one of my favorite authors and teachers, Brené Brown, defines, it is to have faith. Faith, she says, is a place of mystery where we find the courage to believe in what we cannot see and the strength to let go of our uncertainty. A colleague recently shared a story with me. It's a story about a year when the world seemed to fail us. I think it's exactly that definition of faith that Brené Brown describes, a faith of courage to believe in what we cannot see and the strength to let go of our uncertainty. The story of a place where for 3 years the rains had failed, the crops had disappeared, the land was void of life. Things people had taken for granted were now nowhere to be seen. I imagine we could all say that about these last 6 months in one way or another, as our streets seem to be empty for some time, as the world looks so different. This happened in this unknown place. And so an elderly woman, a matriarch of the community, announces, "Only God can help us now. Let's gather and pray for rain," she said. And so the people of all faiths gathered around in the town square and began to pray, thinking that prayer was their last shot at finding rain in these years of drought. And then a little girl and her young brother, holding hands, came running up, and they were holding an umbrella, open. People started to look at them, mostly with frustration. The umbrella was distracting them from their prayers. It was poking people, and then those people were running into other people. But mostly they looked at them and they just thought, this makes no sense, for it's a drought. And so a man turned to them and said, "Why did you bring the umbrella? Can't you see there is no rain and there has not been for 3 years? That's why we're here to pray." "Yes, we know," they said. "That's why we brought this big, colorful umbrella. What we don't understand is why you are not prepared for our prayers to be answered." How many times have we come together to pray this year, to look out at the world and want it to be changed, but had no belief that it could happen? We've left our umbrellas at home. For many, including some of our Jewish friends, faith is about believing in answers to impossible questions. Where will I go when I die? What was life like before the first person was born? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Let religion tell me the answers to these impossible questions. I prefer Dr. Brown's definition. Faith is not about getting answers, it's about getting courageous. It's about having the courage to know that we can face whatever is uncertain in this world today or tomorrow or next month because we brought our umbrella, because we believe that there is enough good, enough God in this world to make it rain eventually, and that we have the strength to wait for that moment. When the pandemic started, I asked a number of you a question we often think about on days like today. If God spoke to you, what would you hope God would say? Without quoting a chapter or verse, many of you responded with the words of our Torah portion this morning. I just want God to tell me that it is all going to be okay. Vayar ki tov, we read in a few moments. I just want to know that the people I care about will be healthy, that my kids will have their health and perhaps health care. I want to know that I will have enough money to visit those I love and provide for those who live with me, and that they will be happy, that I will be happy. Vayar ki tov, just tell me, God, that it will all be good. So often, that's all we really want to hear. And yet, we are seemingly better at counting what is lacking than what is present, at seeing what is bad and not what could be good. It is what Dr. Brown calls a culture of scarcity. We count what is lacking, we count what is failing, what has disappointed us, and what goes wrong. Unlike the book of Genesis, we have fallen victim to a belief that there is not enough in this world for all of us to succeed. Overwhelmed with uncertainty, we start to believe that every scenario is limited, that some of us will win and some will not, that some of us will have wealth and some will not. That some of us will have access to health care, but that there are not enough doctors, enough nurses, enough PPE, or enough money for all of us to be okay. So I better be on that good side. I better take some for myself because I know there's not enough. We think that some of us will have access to a good education, and we've accepted that some just will not. But that is not what Genesis declares was God's perspective. God looked at all of creation and said, Vayar ki tov, it is good. It is God as entrepreneur, not God as the world's quality and control engineer. To read the words of Genesis today is to believe that we must approach uncertainty with an entrepreneurial mentality, a mentality that believes there is more to the world than we can see, and that we have the ability to create it. Not that some will be winners and others will inevitably lose, but rather that there are enough resources in this world for all of creation to be at least good. And so the story of creation is not a story of scarcity, it's a story of abundance. And here abundance is not excess, it's simply the belief that there is enough, that I am enough, that we have enough money, enough resources, enough strength, enough vision to build the world the way it should be. It is the belief that we do not need to settle because the world is not scarce. The world, in fact, is abundant. But this isn't how we think. Too often we think, as author Lynn Twist writes, that when we wake up, we start with a scarcity perspective. She writes, have you ever woken up and said to yourself, I didn't get enough. I didn't get enough sleep. Oh, I didn't get enough exercise. I don't have enough time today. Oh, I don't have enough money or enough strength. This is not how entrepreneurs think. They don't worry about what they don't have. They worry about what they could have. David Rogier is the co-founder of a website some of you may be familiar with. I became familiar with it 2 years ago when a friend invited me to join him on Masterclass. Masterclass hires the most skilled and usually most famous leaders in an industry to teach classes in their field online. For a small fee, anyone can sign up and anyone can learn how to play basketball from LeBron James or how to direct a movie from Ron Howard. Masterclass has been largely successful. It is, at its core, an abundant response to a scarcity mentality. Rogier's grandmother fled Nazi Europe when she was a child and emigrated to the United States. She experienced a scarcity mentality firsthand. After working in factories for years, she applied to medical schools because she was bright, and she was rejected by the dozen. One dean flat out told her that she had 3 strikes against her. He said, you are a woman, you are Jewish, and you are an immigrant. For this reason, she always taught her grandson that an education was something that could never be taken away from you. Like her, Rogier is smart. He received his MBA from Stanford and was hired by a venture capital fund, and I'm sure he made plenty of money. But a year later, thinking of his grandmother, he quit his job because he believes in abundance. When asked what he was going to do, he answered, I'm going to build something. And he did. He started the company under the name Yonka Industries, named for his grandmother. And now anyone with $80 and an internet connection has access to the most elite teachers in their field. This is what it means to read Genesis this year. It's to look out at a world that loves scarcity and to reply with faith and abundance. It's not to wake up and say, I did not get enough. It is, as my teacher and colleague, Rabbi Paul Kipnis, shared in an affirmation, to wake up this year and say, we are enough. As he wrote, when you feel like you are failing at everything you are doing, parenting and grandparenting, partnering, working, say to yourself, I am enough. When you do the best you can with the best of intentions and your kid, your spouse, your boss, your friend still isn't satisfied, say to yourself with an attitude of abundance, I am enough. When it feels like you are barely keeping your head above water, say to yourself, I am enough. When things feel like they should be so easy, but they aren't, when you cannot articulate why you are so sad, or perhaps when you feel guilty because you are so happy, speak with an attitude of abundance and tell yourself that you, in fact, are enough. An attitude of abundance is not only about me being enough, it is about us being enough. It is about there being enough in the world for us to make it good. If there is anything we have seen in the last 6 months, is that we do have enough to live abundantly. We have enough money to give the unemployed an extra $600 a week so they can make their rent. We have enough factories and innovative minds to turn distilleries for vodka into manufacturing plants to make medical supplies for our hospitals. There's enough food for everyone to eat, and there are enough people with enough sense to envision a world where anyone and everyone has an equal opportunity to education, to health care, to wealth, to opportunities that we cannot imagine. The entrepreneur looks at a glass that is half full of water and does not look at the water that is there, its color or its weight. An entrepreneur, like God in Genesis, looks at the space that is left and says, look at the potential. And she believes that there is enough in this world, vayar ki tov, to make it good, to at least make it okay. If you come to the synagogue because you want answers, especially easy, certain, and stress-relieving answers to all the things we do not know about our world, I will tell you that you've come to the wrong place. What we offer, what our tradition offers, is not a story about how the world was created. It offers us a story about what it takes to create in the midst of darkness and uncertainty. It offers us a story of abundance when the world seems scarce. The response to uncertainty is not to be certain. The response to uncertainty is faith. A faith that reminds us that we have the courage to overcome whatever comes next. A faith that gives us the confidence to know we are enough. The faith of the entrepreneurial spirit of abundance. Faith to know that there is enough goodness to go around to everyone, that we should bring our umbrella because times are going to change. May 5781 be a good year, a new year, a year of creativity and a year of overflowing faith, that we will rebuild this world to be a place of abundance once again. And we will then say, Vayar ki tov, it is good, Shana Tova.